This week on the Unabated podcast, SBK takes some time away from the NBA streets to talk about his process, his journey in sports betting, and so much more. It's a great show. Let's get to it.
Unabated. That's the new word, unabated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me, as always, Mr. Unabated himself, Captain Jack Andrews. Jack, we've got a great show coming at people today. We finally were able to get he's free from the chain that we have on his desk. SBK, Stephen Byron Keech, is going to be joining us here, taking a very, very brief break from his toiling in the NBA mines to talk about his process with us. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so this guy is pretty incredible. I'm not often blown away by someone's betting prowess or their knowledge of a sport, but I have been with him. Tom, when I was younger, there was a commercial, and the tagline was, "When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen." Well, when S.B. Keech speaks, people listen. I mean, our Discord, half the messages are, "What do you think of this, at SBK?"
Yep.
He's been very good in his knowledge, his qualitative knowledge of the NBA, which has led to our quantitative data science being that much stronger. And our NBA team is doing some amazing things. So I definitely want to get to talk to him and see what his backstory is, how he got this way. I have a feeling it'll be through DFS. That's where they all come from these days.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking forward to talking to him.
I am too. I mean, it is so interesting because especially given, how numbers driven we are. We're Unabated is really primarily a tool for top-down bettors here. When we start talking about the prop market, it starts getting into a lot more origination and it starts to get into a lot more qualitative. And I think he's one of the people that just so perfectly balances qualitative with quantitative analysis to get you just that right cocktail that works perfectly for the NBA.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Jack, I think without any further ado, we should bring him on.
Let's do it.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome on into the show, Unabated's own SBK, Stephen Byron Keech. Stephen, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. I know you guys are absolutely slammed over there in the NBA streets.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's good. A little bit of a slow day here, so a nice opportunity for it. But yeah, we're certainly keeping busy. And that's going to be the case for what seems like forever now. Like 4 months left, something like that. So
yeah,
a while.
Well, one of the absolutely rare slow days for you, given all that you guys are doing out there every day. One of my personal favorites, and we'll probably use it as the thumbnail for this, is the SBK approved meme that has been going around in the Discord. Now, every single time people are hitting you up and saying, "Hey, do you like this bet? Do you like that bet?" It's just you in that exact hoodie with that scowl, just going, "Yep."
Yep. Yeah, that's I was gonna say. Maybe I should have put the hood up. It is this exact hoodie, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that I kind of hope Justin finds a new one. That's not the most flattering image of me. That I think maybe we could do a little bit better. But yeah, I think it gets the point home. I certainly seem locked in that photo.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking a lot in this episode about how a bet gets SBK approved, how you start looking at something and say, hey, you know what, that is something that I'm liking here. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you and your background here. Because what is it that came first for you? Was it your interest in the NBA? Was it your interest in sports betting? I know you came to us through, you were raised on the DFS streets. Give us a little bit about your background here.
I've been a basketball fan for as long as I can remember, pretty much. I grew up in Philadelphia, so I've been a Sixers fan. The 2001 Sixers team, I think, was like what really kind of got me like heavily into it. I was, I think, in seventh grade, like started doing some very low level bookieing. That was kind of my introduction. Me and a friend had like thinking of the things that we would do now, so horrifying. Like I forget what the website was, but we would print out odds in the morning and then take them to school and basically let people bet into those numbers all day, which thinking back was like the dumbest thing we could have possibly done. But I'm glad that I got some exposure early and was able to learn some of those things at an early age. But yeah, my really path to sports betting started in daily fantasy. When I was in college at Penn State, my senior year, I had a roommate who just randomly stumbled upon Roto Grinders, which was my first introduction to daily fantasy at all. I remember playing a contest. It was an NBA contest. I think it was like in in the early part of the season. But I was Anderson Varejao was a guy that was in that lineup. I still remember that first night. Still kind of remember like that feeling of winning. Like I think that'll always be a memory that's ingrained. But that was kind of the starting point. I remember at that point, like maybe within a week, like just emailing Cameron McMillan at Roto Grinders and just being like, I love what you guys are doing. Like I have a lot of time right now. I'm a senior at Penn State. I'm not taking too many classes. Like if there's anything I can do to get my foot in the door, like I'm willing. And that kind of led to some, like they had a blog program which you could get win awards if your blogs were posted on the homepage. So that was kind of the way I got my foot in the door in there. And then pretty quickly after that, maybe within a year, I kind of started working with projections with those guys. And that's another thing, like thinking back to how we did projections like 12, 13 years ago is horrifying. But we've obviously made a lot of improvements over that time. But yeah, it's been a long run. I think I started with the NFL, which is, obviously tough, but a little bit easier to manage than a day-to-day sport like NBA, where it's like you're basically having like an NFL slate every day instead of once a week. But yeah, slowly kind of transitioned into NBA and MLB. And that basically became my full-time job for the last like decade pretty much, is just projecting player projections across those three sports. That's kept me pretty busy all year round.
Yeah, so I was kind of curious as to how much NBA you have to watch to know ball the way that you know ball. Do you watch every game?
And I want to make that a compound question because it's not just the amount that you have to watch in order to know ball, but to just be able to be a profitable bettor. How much NBA would you say you have to be watching too?
I think it depends. With like my job, I watch very little live NBA now. Like, we are pretty much on from like 9 a.m. to when the last game starts. So like I might catch a West Coast game live. I think the best thing that the NBA has done, and I really started doing this with the WNBA, is you can, the day after the game, you can go into, I think NBA.com has this capability. You can go into a box score there. You want to see, a player's assists, a player's rebounds, a player's shot attempts. You can just, they're like hyperlink. You click on that link and they will immediately pop up and you can see every, individual stat that, or, how they were. You watch the video of how it was earned. So you can, if there's things I'm curious about, which there often is, that's generally the way I consume the NBA. It's generally not live. Like you can go on YouTube, see like 10, 15-minute clips of the games. I don't think that you can get that much from that. But I do think if you're trying to dig into a specific thing, like those NBA.com like highlights can be kind of helpful. Like it was really helpful for me in the WNBA. Like they don't track advanced stats. So I was trying to manually count potential assists, watching video clips like that. So that was what really got me kind of in that habit. But yeah, I think that's like a super helpful way that if you can't catch games live to kind of see, why things happen, how ththings happened. But if you're somebody who's like, fresh into the NBA, it's not like your forte. You don't know rotations that well. You don't, know every player in the league. I think watching certainly helps. How much I think is up for debate. But I think like just watching things happen, sometimes watching guys play can give you some sort of context clues as to like, things in the future in terms of, if you may want to take a rebound under on a guy. Maybe you notice, he's not like generally not defending on ball. He's kind of, hanging out, and generally in a good spot to rebound. So like just this kind of things like that you might want to see. But I think the newer you are to it, the more beneficial it is to watch and like kind of see things happen. But I think once you've kind of gotten to that point where you are kind of plugged in, like watching live is probably not as valuable unless you're betting live, which I'm generally not. Like as the games are going on, like when we get a 7:00 Eastern time start, like I'm generally at that point 7:10. Like once that game locks, I'm looking to the next games, and if there's no next games, I'm generally looking to the next day. So I'm generally not like trying to watch things. I don't like sweating my bets. I'm just generally looking for the next thing.
And it's interesting because you guys walk such a good balance between quantitative and qualitative when it comes to the bets that you're looking at and how you do projections and everything. So it's funny because John said the same exact thing when we talked to him about I don't really watch that much NBA live anymore, and it's you still are able to know ball while also you know what to look for and what not to look for, and it's not as big of a deal to be missing a game.
Yeah, I think it's, part of that is because I have watched for so long. And like, I watch a decent amount of college. I watch a lot of summer league. I'm like pretty plugged in. Like summer leagues are one of my favorite things to bet, the preseason. So like, I generally know, like a lot of like, the weird players who come on to like rosters where like a lot of people might not have any idea who that person is. So like, I generally know, who these guys are. And if I don't, I want to watch if they're, especially like rookies, guys that I haven't seen much in college. Those are guys I want to watch for a game or two. But guys that I've seen, the Damian Lillards, the Giannis's, like we know, kind of who they are. But it's especially like each new season, I think as coaching stuff changes, as rotation changes, like you like to see that stuff kind of play out and see how things shake out. So I think there's definitely some value in it, but I think the more plugged in you are, especially with numbers, and if you're betting every day, I don't think you necessarily need to be watching every day. Also,
Now, you were hugely successful at Action Network, and a ton of people love tailing your bets, and it's certainly something when you were announced when it was announced you were coming over and coming on board with us, a bunch of people were like, "Oh, cool! How are we gonna see his bets? How are we gonna be able to tail all of that?" What's it like dealing with? I mean, those expectations, dealing with knowing that people are following you and people are going to be tailing you this way, and also you never went the pick selling route.
no, I mean, I think it obviously helped that I did well, in terms of the support. Like, I think if I wasn't winning, it wouldn't have been enjoyable. I wouldn't have gained the following that I did. I think, a lot of people seem to have a negative connotation towards people sharing edges, giving stuff out, which I understand. But for me personally, like that, the time at Action from the start of it to the end, like I think I gained a ton personally from that, like just outside. Like I think I probably cost myself some accounts. The I was probably getting some not real CLV. When you have 50,000 people tailing your bets, you're often obviously going to get a lot of closing line value, and that is not the best thing for account health. So there's certainly downsides for me as an individual bettor. But I think the upside is like I've gained so many great relationships from that. Even just random people that have reached out sometimes have proven to be very valuable for me in one way or the other. So I think like the network that I've been able to attain because of that is probably the most beneficial part of it. But yeah, it's when you have a following of that size and you're giving stuff out, like especially for free, like you still hear about it when you're losing. That part of it is not fun, obviously. But fortunately, I didn't really come into too many long cold streaks. It seemed like things went pretty smoothly for me. I couldn't really have asked for too much better of a 2 or 3 year run out. I'm sure variance was on my side a little bit, during that span. But it was a great experience. I'll always treasure the time there. I think I made a lot of great contacts because of the success I had there. So I think it's done a lot for me personally. But at the other side of it, I understand why there's a negative connotation towards it. But yeah, I think the downside in terms of my personal betting with losing some accounts, I think the relationships I've made and the betting partners that I have formed because of this has ultimately been a much better situation.
All right, so let's move into your work here with Unabated. And one of the things that I think is really special about our NBA product is the amount of work that goes into these projections and then keeping up with the news, the injuries, the lineup information, who the starters are. Stephen, walk us through, you mentioned earlier, like when a game tips off, you're already thinking about the next game. And if it's the last game of the night, you're thinking about the games tomorrow. Is that when your process starts, the night before?
Yeah, usually I try to do, an initial run of minutes, especially for the next slate. Like by the time I shut it down at night, like we've done a full run of minutes for the next day. Some of the back-to-back teams, if there's teams, they're playing the second night of a back-to-back, we generally don't do too much with them and try to wait till we get an injury report the next afternoon. But yeah, it certainly starts then. I'd say usually by like 11, 10:30 Eastern, I'm usually kind of set up for the next day. And then by about earlier than 9 a.m. I think like 8 a.m. most days we got John hopping on, like getting into rate edits. I'm usually on not too long after that, kind of doing the same thing. I'm generally a little bit more focused on the minute side of things in the morning, and then as we start to feel better about where we are there, kind of hone in more on the rate side. But it's pretty much like an around the clock thing. I think the only real time I get kind of away from it is when I sign off to when I kind of get up in the morning. The overnight period, there's you might get an Orlando Magic injury report at 12:30 at night sometimes, but other than that, you're not getting anything. So it's it's the calm time. But yeah, anytime after about like 9 a.m. is when we can kind of start expecting news to roll in, and that's when we'll start making changes. But yeah, it's pretty much 8 a.m. to maybe like 10:30, 11 o'clock. So it's a long day.
Do you find that your personal betting happens earlier in the day, or are you also kind of riding along with the team here and making your picks, your personal bets rather, not picks, your personal bets in that like last half hour when starters are known?
That is the vast majority of my betting for sure. I think the place that I like to focus in on the most, and I think the place that a lot of our users have probably found a lot of value is those, when we release, we generally have lines for most starters, especially without like injury situations. But it's the bench players that we won't generally get until half hour before tip, shortly after starting lineups are announced. I think those are the most likely situations, especially like as a person that's using this product. If you see a big edge on something that just pops on a bench player, I think it's far more likely that is a true real edge than an edge you might see on at release on something that's been up for 8 hours. So I think like those tend to be the markets that I have the best success with in terms of bench players, ancillary guys who may have more volatile minutes than most. So yeah, a lot of my betting is kind of forced to happen in that window, just given that typically we don't have lines for those players. Sometimes we'll get I think it's been a little bit more common this season that I've noticed, like especially teams that don't have like injuries waiting in the wings. You might get some bench player stuff early in the day. I think that's becoming a little bit more common now. But yeah, still like I think the best value tends to pop up like right before tip off, generally in that like 40 to 40 minutes before start is usually kind of when those things start to roll in.
And you come up with a lot of, I don't really necessarily want to call them non-standard bets. It's not like you're taking some exotic, make your own parlay that you're crafting an edge on, but you come up with some stuff that's outside of the standard points, rebounds, assists realm a lot. Is a lot of that just intuition? Is there more qualitative analysis that you're putting into it? How do you come up with some of those?
Let's say it's a combination of those things. I definitely dabble a little bit in the turnover markets, steals, blocks, like those kinds of things, threes, even, which, can be highly volatile. But I think if you have a pulse on it, can also be very profitable. I, just really like to dig into like the weirder markets and the ones that are generally, I think, a little bit harder to price. Like turnovers is a one that like I really like to play around, like with just kind of trying to quantify some things that I think are generally not used to. I just like to try to experiment with different things to try to determine those things in maybe a more efficient way than is being done now. So I think like especially with turnovers, like that's a place where I like to play around with data and do some weirder things maybe that aren't standard to try to see if I can uncover something interesting. So yeah, I think that's really is what breeds that. It's just an interest in new markets and trying to kind of get ahead of things. And when I feel like I am, that's kind of when I'll start to fire on those weirder markets.
You're also pretty famous in the Discord at this point for never wanting to take an over. Not exactly the most shocking strategy for a sharp better, but talk a little bit more about that. Will you seriously never take an over, or is it just that most of what you're gravitating to, you're finding the edge in that maybe a little more heavily juiced? I know you like to take a lot of under turnovers at like minus 170 and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely have no issues drinking juice. And yeah, I just I have a weird, I think, personal thing against overs. I feel like I generally like it. It just scares me. I don't really know why. I think the most common situation I'm on overs for in the NBA at least is I think bench player points overs. I think is generally the most common thing. I think the most common thing I play on bench players generally is rebound and assist unders. So I think it varies for sure. Yeah, I don't know that I have a great way to answer that.
I mean, it,
Well,
it does make a lot of sense, like especially because if you're going to find an edge in the minutes, it's probably going to have to do with the bench. Like if you're going to find an edge in an over involving a minutes discrepancy, it's probably going to have something to do with a bench player's points, right?
For sure, yeah. I think points, PRA are generally two areas where I'll be more likely to play overs. But yeah, I mean I think we talked about this a lot. I think generally using our simulator, the median versus mean thing, like you're just
mhm.
generally going to end up on or unders. So yeah, that's has been my experience. Certainly, my preference is to be on that side. I don't know really when that switch flipped for me. But yeah, it feels like it's been a while. And yeah, it takes a lot for me to want to feel good about playing like an over on a star player, especially like those things I feel like I'm really, really scared of.
That's one of the things that I've modified my own betting based on listening to you guys and looking at the results. I bet more unders now in NBA props than I was originally betting just based on my own interpretation of the numbers early in the season. So I look at our prop screen as the numbers dance around, and my eyes focus on the unders first, even if there is a larger edge on an over above it. It's worked well for me. I'm not saying it is like a basic strategy to do, but part of what reinforces it for me is you, Stephen, saying that hey, you love unders, you hate overs. And I'm like, well, this guy's been so successful. Let me try to adopt some of that.
I think I pretty much do that exact same thing. I
Yeah.
need a bigger threshold to play overs for sure. And yeah, my eyes are 100% gravitating toward the unders. That when I look at the screen, that's always kind of the things I'm looking for. But yeah, I'm right there with you on needing generally a bigger edge, especially on I think like main rotation players. I generally want a bigger edge to play those overs. I think it's always worth considering how long lines have sat out there too. Like that's another part of it. Like with release, like a lot of these things have been out for so long. Whereas a lot of the bench player stuff, like we said, is generally a lot fresher.
So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of wrap this around by talking about how the bettor needs to think about these NBA props. The first question that I think we get from a lot of people is how much time do I have to put into this? Now, you guys, the three of you, are a tremendous shortcut for the average bettor, the average unabated member. But there's still a duty they have to do. And so how much time do you think they need to put in to make this all work for them on a daily basis?
Let's say especially for bigger slates, like you want a few hours. I think the most important time to be around, obviously I think you want to be around at release, but you especially like in that 7 to 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock window. Like if you can, I understand that that's an issue for people with families and dinner and stuff, but if you can set aside those 3 hours, especially like from the time the first starting lineups are coming out till the time the last game tips, I think that is the most valuable time period to make yourself available. I think it is, still important to be around at release. I mean, you definitely can, despite the fact that those things have been sitting up, there's definitely still value to be found there. But I think the most frequent value and the most like dependable value is probably found in those later windows. So I would say if you can find a way to get your wife, girlfriend, whatever, to be off your back from 7 to 10:30, that's probably the perfect setup.
We won't actually tell people to, that's the thing about having a family is if they're a problem to you, if you ignore them, they just go away.
Yeah.
No, that's bad advice.
I feel like that's advice many sports bettors have taken, though.
Yeah, no comment. So the other thing is, at Unabated, we like to have people bring something to the table. Now, it could be as simple as have as many outs as you possibly have available to line shop. Like that's your duty to all this. But what are some things that the Unabated member can bring to the table to get even more out of the NBA product?
I think like you having some context around rotations, I think is big. Like, we try to think about minutes, especially in like a range of outcomes, and try to generally land in the middle of that. But, there are a lot of like different situations, like guys that play in blowouts are kind of like an example of like, it might be hard to, they probably have more, volatility off that mean projection than most guys. So I think like having some sort of an idea about that and knowing on a player level a little bit like where that volatility is maybe bigger than other places would be helpful.
And that's a great example of knowing the rotation, so you're knowing what the cause and effect is for removal of a player. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, piggybacking on that for a second, how would you recommend for someone who doesn't know that yet? What's the best way to go about starting to learn that stuff, if there is an answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, just paying attention nightly. I think, there's a lot of values we found in just listening, paying attention to the Discord, I think, on a daily basis. Like, obviously, the live streams, I think, are a great place to, like, get some of that context. And I think there are a lot of things that we say that might help you, like, shape the way that people think about certain things. So I think those are two great places to start, obviously, if you are an unabated member already. But yeah, I think just just being involved in betting NBA props every day obviously is going to be probably your best way to get better at that. But yeah, just consuming the league. There's a ton of like great advanced stats on the NBA website too, like that are totally free. That I think in terms of like potential assists, rebound chances, like you can get some added context on things that way. So I think like doing some of your own due diligence certainly helps, and I think the NBA like makes it kind of easy to do that. Whether it's like things I mentioned earlier, watching video clips, looking at advanced stats, like they provide a lot totally free that's available to everybody. So I think like trying to take advantage of some of that stuff is pretty important too, for sure.
God bless the advanced statistics departments, because I mean, could you imagine doing this back when Jack was getting started here and you just didn't have any of that?
No, I mean, I feel like it's like, it's a one thing like betting like the WNBA, which is, something that I think a lot of NBA people do, not having those advanced stats changes like my approach to that prop market fairly considerably with assists and rebounds for sure.
And the other flip side to that too is you don't have the data, which means you have to dig harder for it, which means fewer people are doing it, which means you can get a bigger edge by doing so.
100%. Yeah, I think that was like that was kind of why I was interested in doing that. It's like I don't think many people are going to like watch these games, watch each shot attempt, and try to track potential assists and stuff like that. So even though it became too big of an undertaking for me to do as well, but yeah, those markets are generally a little bit different for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being with us today. I know that you have a very busy schedule to get back to as far as taking care of everything involving the NBA product that we have here for people. Of course, if they want to check out all of the awesome work you're doing, they can do it at unabated.com/NBA. And they can also do it by checking you out on Twitter at Steph Byron Keech, X now. I guess we're officially getting to the point where we're going to be calling it that.
Never.
We still haven't changed the logos on here, that's for sure. But again, that's at Steph Byron Keech, Keech, Keech. And of course, they can always talk to you in the Unabated Discord, which is free to join. So highly encourage you to use the link in the description of this video to do that. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget that 5-star rating and review. Tell your friends about the show. It really does help us grow. But in the meantime, that is going to do it for us. We'll see you guys next episode. Let's cash some tickets.